So you can see here, slowly melting. You know, wait till that's all completely liquid. So I didn't have a problem with pinholing. I don't know what the causes and conditions for that are. If it's adding air into it, I don't think it is, but. So with this board that I just did a few minutes ago, they say, say 10 to 15 layers. I know I've said it 100 times, but you don't need to do a layer a day. So like I can see here from my angle that it's pretty dry right in this area. It's still wet right here. But as soon as that's is a uniform kind of lightish gray texture to it. What I've been doing is going over with the paintbrush, just dipping it in the water, getting just very little, and then going over the entire board real quickly so it kind of comes back to this dull gray kind of appearance to it. And then I can do the second coat. And so, but you need to wait until it does dry between each coat. And then as you do more and more layers, so you want that. You want it to completely dry, and then I just get it just really just lightly damp, and then I think when you put the next coat of gesso onto it, that helps it adhere. It blends into, melts into the preceding layer of gesso that you had on there. So even though it's 15 layers, it theoretically. Ideally would be actually just one big layer, but you can't put it down all that quantity down in one go, because then as it dries, shrinking rates, it will cause cracking in the gesso and in the board, and then pretty much it's a useless board. You could come over with some hot water, bring it completely back down to the fabric, and start over again, and that's not unheard of. Have to do that. So I will wait for this still, because it's such a large board. Like if I was doing something this size, I probably could do 5 layers of this in the morning, and then I would let it sit for 24 hours, till the next morning anyway, 22 hours. Come back and I could do 5 more, and then sometimes if I know it's just a practice board, if the surface looks good, I'll stop at 10. If I knew this were going to be gifts or it's going to be used in the monastery, I might go to 15. And so we're getting really close here with this gesso. You can see there's still just, I can't even pick out a piece. It's falling apart on me, which is good. So I'll gently stir it in. I can tell it needs to, the stirring is just helping it melt. See, it's getting close. Some chunky. Probably another 2 minutes, and I think that'll be ready. I'm just doing this to waste time. Make it look like I'm doing something important that you'll be, why is he doing that? For no reason at all. I'm cleaning the surface of the board, making sure that there's no little bits of fabric on it or any dust. Okay, while we're waiting, this is some scrap material that I had laying around when I cut these boards. So watch this. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to clean this board off. Slightly. See, even Jody Paulo can learn new tricks. He was complaining earlier because the table was dirty, and so he's going to clean the table. Hop. So by having this cleaned off the edges here as best I can in this sort of conditions we're in, when I'm painting the gesso onto this, occasionally I notice that the brush is picking up little bits of dust or dirt, debris on the surface, so I clean that away. This is looking really good. You know, mentioning that about the cleaning, having the surface where you're working nice and clean, reminds me of a story of one of my art professors from college. One of the best pieces of advice he gave me is Professor Doug Kalish. He, I remember him saying one day, he said, you know, like every time you leave the studio, you should leave feeling good about what you've done. And so if you're painting and you're feeling really good about what you're doing, there can be a tendency to want to stay longer and keep painting because the process or whatever your creativity activity is going well, you just want to keep doing it. He suggested to stop. Like if you have a certain period of time that you were planning to be there, say 2 or 3 hours, at the end of that, if it's appropriate, then to go ahead and leave. He said, because when you leave the studio feeling good and feeling excited, feeling full about what you were doing, you'll want to come back. And so your mind will keep processing what it's been working on, it's excited. And I just felt that a really wonderful piece of advice. But he also went on to, he's like, well, if you're painting and things aren't going well, I was a painter, so that's why I keep using that analogy. But if you're in your creative process and things aren't going well and you're going to leave in a bad mood, so find something to do in the studio that you feel good about. Cleaning up your workstation, reorganizing your paints, cleaning your paintbrushes, doing something kind for somebody else, going over and cleaning their workstation or cleaning the communal sink that everybody's using. So that way, if you do something that you feel good about, even if it has nothing to do with art, go and compliment somebody on their particular project, then when you leave, you'll remember that and you'll feel good about yourself, and then you'll be excited to come back to the studio. And this whole process for me is about having fun, learning about your heart, learning about your own mind, and I think I mentioned it already, but having fun. Okay, so I think I let this sit too long, rambling. But thank you, Professor Kalish, for that piece of wisdom. It stuck with me. I'm embarrassed to say 30 years later, I still remember it. And so, I'm not embarrassed that I remember it, but embarrassed that it's 30 years. And I'm not embarrassed about it being 30 years. So again, I'm doing this rather quickly. This is just the first layer. And let me see, does anybody remember how many layers I'm going to do? Yeah, that's right. I've said it 25 times probably at this point. I'm not used to working on boards this large. And what I can do, it's kind of convenient to work on something this large for what I'm doing. So I did have an idea for these particular boards that they're going to be the very well-known photographs of Ajahn Mun and Ajahn Chah. So to the right and the left of the doors as you enter into Birkin's main shrine room. If these paintings turn out, big if, because I've actually never worked an object this large in a painting either. I usually work, I think like 12 by 18 inches is kind of the largest size painting I've done so far. So this would be a challenge. It would be a new challenge, new unknown territory, which again is an aspect I like about icon painting, kind of pushing what's comfortable, and you learn a lot about yourself, you learn a lot about your mind, going outside your comfort level, doing it in a way that's not dangerous to yourself or others, so people won't have to come and rescue you, but doing it in a way that's fun and educational. So yeah, that's why I'm going to try these at a larger scale. And the nice thing is if they work, who knows, this might actually be the medium that works best for me. This might be, I can be more expressive, or something quite beautiful could appear from this particular mode. Or, what we all fear is it will be complete failures, it won't work, and people will laugh at us and ridicule us and say, ha. And you say, ha. And we'll feel humiliated. But the nice thing about that is that if we do this, I do this, and it doesn't work, there's a power tools just over there in the workshop. We can, even after it's painted, I can cut it up into smaller boards and go back to the size boards that I know. I can do an icon that's at least presentable. Okay, so now I mentioned earlier that sometimes this solution, it's getting colder as it's not in there, but it's also getting thick, and I can see it's leaving little traces of streaks. So I'm gonna, this is still fairly hot water. Can mix that in there. Yeah, even this container is a little cool, so I'm actually going to set the whole container into the hot water, and it's heating up. And actually, as I can see, it's kind of getting some layers there. I'm going to add some water in here to this. Those of you who are professional board makers are probably cringing right now, saying, oh, what is he doing? But this is all an experiment. So I'm just going to try to level that out where I see I was getting a little too much gesso there. And I can see I need to add a little bit more in these areas. Yeah, it's a little warmer. When I'm doing this, I'm kind of weaving back and forth, as I'm looking at this under different lighting conditions. I can see where there's areas here, here, here that don't have any of this gesso on it yet, or it's an uneven sort of layer. Here. Anybody who's ever used the phrase sort of bored as watching paint dry has never watched paint dry. This is quite fascinating. Seeing the different textures and the different layers of paint. Just even learning what works and what doesn't work. It's like if something we tried fails, and you got to start all over again. At least in my profession, as a Buddhist monk, that's a good thing. That you can, you have the time, you have the space. It's all about learning. So, seriously, it does not matter to me if these turn out. I think that's probably why I can have fun doing this. Or if I was trying to make a living doing this, I could see that could be add another level of complication. So we'll see if Donica can get, I don't know if you can get this board and this board. You can see that there's different, this one now is actually dry enough for me. See that? I'm putting my hand on it. It's not coming off my hands. If I did that here, it's kind of like on this one that I just painted, if I were to do that, I would leave fingerprints and mar the surface, so I don't want to do that. But this is at a point here where if I just got a little bit of water on here, can you see that? You can just see the slightly different texture, and I would just get this whole board just very lightly wet like that. And then I could do my second, this is ready for the second coat. And I could probably do the next 4 coats on both of these, and you wouldn't notice much of a difference in what I've shown you. I think as I added more and more and more, maybe some of the texture, as you can see, this is really textured, and like from my angle here, it's like I can definitely see there's the cloth coming through in little bits here, and here there's sort of the texture of the cloth, this really fine. It's almost like sandpaper at a certain level. Here you can see where everything wasn't covered. So just if I kept doing this, and I will today, I'll do 4 layers on this today, these 2, and then we can come back tomorrow and show you what it looks like. Hopefully around the same time tomorrow, 24 hours, and then I'll do another 5. And because these might end up being in the shrine room, I will do 15. I can't make any definite statements, but I will attempt to do, we'll see, I'll probably do 15 layers of pigments on those. And I don't know if you can show the edge of this board here. These may not actually be the ones that I'm using, because you can see here this isn't the highest quality plywood. I think there's like 5 or 6 layers of plywood in there, versus I keep mentioning the high quality plywood. You can see how these are really tight, and there's many more layers in there. But it's all unknown. We'll see what happens. Thank you, Donna. Whew. There's a lot in there.
My arm.
Yeah, you should. We'll have to have a